The next area we want to talk about is what did I call this? Did I call this roles? I did. I called this the role of bike officers. Yes, the role of a bike officer. I'll take the head tonight. There are two types of disturbances to which the bike patrol officers will go, and that's the spontaneous and the anticipated. The anticipated is the one we talked about with all of the kit and the gear and the preparation of the bike changes. Those are the kinds of things that are anticipated, that we got notice of, we've been training for, we've been planning for. Those aren't really the ones that we're going to get very often. Those are the ones we need to be prepared for, but it's the spontaneous ones that we need to be working towards, because those can happen at any time. In Edmonton, which is a city to the north of us, they had July 1st riots. Now, July 1st is our July 4th, and so July 1st is Canada Day, and that's when we have our celebration, our fireworks and whatnot, and our military fly over, and if the plane makes it the whole way over, then then he lands and he becomes the Navy. It's not that bad. We're self-deprecating. We have a really good army. He is on holidays. The July 1st celebration in Edmonton, an area called Whyte Avenue, W-H-Y-T-E, and if you look up Whyte Avenue, you can see the Whyte Avenue riots on the internet. They're pretty cool. But this was just another day. There was nothing. It was just another day. It was just another night. It was just another weekend of training. July 1st means that rather than 40,000 people being there, 50,000 people are there. So it was nothing special. And these are the things that where we talk about critical mass, where we talk about the eye of the dragon, or whatever you want to call it, something triggered that group of drunks who left the bar at 2 o'clock and triggered that group of drunks to act out. Don't know why. They just did. Now, when they started their riot, there's no point in having bikes. So the bikes aren't a part of that equation. But my point is it's a spontaneous event. Now, we don't know from one day to the next, one call to the next. We all know the kind of calls that are going to be trouble, but generally those aren't the ones we have trouble with. It's the ones we don't know that are going to be trouble. And it's the same with this. If things build spontaneously, that's when we start to develop problems, and that's when we start to see the issues arise. When we get into some of the stuff tomorrow, we've got some video clips of a rally that turned sour on us. It was just a group of people who decided that they were going to demonstrate against the war, and they were going to have their voices heard. The vast majority of them were of Iranian descent, Muslims, and we had them escalate. They had a few hundred, they had 400 or 500 people at this rally, but about 100 of them decided that they had critical mass. It was at this one that we had 2 what we call flashes. And a flashover is an expression with fires, and a flash within our environment is when they escalate and escalate and they finally flash. They boil over, something happens, and that's when we had the gun grab. That was the first. They had a second flash at the Rocky Mountain Plaza when they tried to get in to see the U.S. consulate, and or to breach the U.S. consulate, and so they had a second flash there when that happened. And we have some really good video footage of that, and you'll be able to see some of the things that we did that didn't work well. And during our debriefs, we talked about why they didn't work well and how we could do things better. And those are the learning opportunities that we want to make sure that we share here, so that if things, like this was just a rally. This was nothing. And it escalated. And during the time that it escalated, when we found ourselves being attacked, we had no public order team in position to back us up because we had no knowledge. We had no idea that this spontaneous rally was going to turn into a sour event. Vancouver during the APEC, which is the Asia Pacific Economic Council. APEC was in Vancouver, and Jiang Zemin, who is the president of China, was there. President of the United States was there, and I'm sorry, I don't remember which one of this video footage. You might be able to pick out who it was, but I don't know who it was. This was back in '98. Clinton?
Third president, right?
What's that?
That's his third president.
That was your president?
No. Yeah, he was our president, but.
Your favorite?
He was our president.
So anyway, they were there. Once again, the rallies, the stages that were there, they were anticipating certain things to happen. They have a very, very well-documented flash. And you never know what's going to flash a crowd. And you'll be able to see what flashed the crowd. The crowd flashed because of an equipment failure, believe it or not. They had a fence. They put up this temporary fence, and they used zips. In Vancouver, they have the Indy race in Vancouver, the Indy car race, and they have these tall fences that they're tire barriers to keep the tires from, if there's a collision, from going into the crowd. But the idea is that it's a chain link fence, and if the tire hits it, it just pushes into the bars and bounces out. So they zip them on, just to hold it in place. Well, they use these zips to hold the fence in place for the protest rally. A couple guys climbed up, started to climb up this fence. The zips broke, the fence comes down, the crowd, they flash. We talked a little bit about the use of force continuum. It's kind of a shitty slide, unfortunately. Sorry. Is this sort of what you guys? Is there something, the model that you could use that looked familiar to this? Officer presence, verbal intervention, empty hand hard as opposed to soft. That's hands-on as opposed to hand twists and those kinds of things. That's when we start to escalate the hand-to-hand. Aerosols, impact, weapons that would be asked, lethal force. Is this sort of the same kind of continuum? And we've got cooperative, non-cooperative, and then we go from non-cooperative through the resistance stage. And we deal with that an awful lot. When we talk about non-cooperative, when we approach people and we say get up and move, and they don't, and we have to move them, that's non-cooperative. Makes sense. Resistant non-cooperative is taking it up a notch, where they lock arms, they handcuff themselves. They use things called sleeping dragons, if you've ever heard of those. Sleeping dragon is a tube, and inside the tube they put their arms and they handcuff themselves, or they use, normally when they use handcuffs, they're dedicated to the cause forever, because how do you unlock them? But they'll use the carabiners to lock themselves so they can unlock it whenever they choose. Torch, big saw blades we used to call fire into with the big saw blades to cut through these. Some of the tubes are made of cement. One of the things that they did then is that they started covering their cement tubes with gas-soaked rags, and then outside of that would be tin foil and duct tape and whatnot. And the idea is that when they would get in with these big saws, the sparks would ignite the rags, but they're making a statement. I mean, look at how oppressive the man is when he's lighting us on fire. So these kinds of things are different levels of escalation. We'll look at some of that stuff. We'll see what we can do with that. As bike cops, at the top end of what you're going to do, you're not there. You're beyond what your righteous position is. At that point in time, when they're resistant, it's time for the public order guys, the riot squad. It's time for them to come out, and then we take other duties. So We talk about different levels of force and where we fit into that. This for us is very important because we take a look at general duty response in terms of how we deal with it. Tactical bike teams, tactical teams, Nomex and soft hat. What we call soft hat presence is the public order guys without their hats and bats. So that's another level that we can go to. Because once we've gone to the public order end, then they will be put in pending the arrival of the hats and bats. And then full public order response. So that's just a level. Whether you choose to have that or not is up to you, but my view is as long as everybody knows, everybody is on the same page, that if you guys are deployed to something and it goes stupid, you know how stupid it has to get before you're pulled out. And in our view, bikes are not there to get when it gets stupid. As soon as it escalates to a point where it's resistant, then the bikes are pulled out. Establishing a set of rules really helps to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Not so much for us, but for the command. Because if command know the rules, the rules of engagement, they'll know when the sergeant of the bike team is calling in that we've got resistant protesters, we've got people that are being non-cooperative, that are becoming resistant. At that point in time, then command calls in the hats and bats. Everything needs to be measured, and we talk about that. A measured response to any event is really important because if we don't measure our response, we end up in trouble. When we look at intelligence gathering and the goals that we're trying to accomplish, this is where we start to learn what's going on. And we can learn so much about what's going on prior to the event. Many events, what we will do is tear down the protest posters. Every protest now has posters. We tack them to walls, attack them to poles, pull those things down, and what the next step is the web page. You got to be cautious about that though, because a lot of them have really strong connections. And if you go and dig through their web page and they can identify you as a copper, and you've used your home computer to go to this web page to find out about the protest rally, and they know that you might be a leader or a member of the opposition, they can be creative with what they do to your computer. And so we would suggest that if you're going to be digging through, you give it to your Intel people. In Calgary, our Intel people use secure computer systems so that they can't dig through to find out who it is that's looking at their information. They are extremely well organized. The splinter groups that cause the problems are not the ones that are as organized as the protest groups themselves. There is a lady in Atlanta who donates $1 million every year to protest groups. Because in her estimation...
Jane Fonda.
Sorry?
Jane Fonda.
Yes. Is that it?
Nope, this is an old lady. It's an old lady. She believes it could be Jane Fonda, I don't know.
I spit on her the other day.
This is a lady who believes that protest is the best way to keep government in line. And she donates $1 million. These aren't people who are eating granola and walking barefoot in the parks. These are people who have support systems that go all the way through the branches of the government. They run all the way through the branches of probably any social group you can imagine. It's some of them uses it as sort of their hobby. You never see them out there, but they're the ones that are financing it. So when we talk about gathering intelligence, we want to know what the cause is. What issue do they want to address? And it's important for us to ask. You can ask them. You go up and say, why are you here? I mean, most of the times you'll know. We'll show video footage of a protest rally in Calgary, or rather in Vancouver, and you'll see the signs. It's a forum. A protest rally is a forum for your cause. And the signs at the front of this protest rally were free Tibet, free education for Aboriginal women, save the whales. Everybody was on board. So you need to know what the cause is, because depending on the cause will depend on how you react. Certainly when we know the cause, it's easier for us to deal with it. For instance, when we know that they're protesting the oil industry, we know that we're going to be targeting our protest, our oil buildings. And so it's really important to know what their cause is and what they're attempting to accomplish. Identify the groups involved, organizations, ethnic backgrounds, and agendas, and they'll certainly tell you them. If you talk to the protest leaders, protest managers, they'll tell you what their agenda is. They'll tell you what they want to accomplish. Because very likely the group that is leading the group, leading the protest, leading the rally, is not the protest splinter group that's going to cause problems. In many of our rallies, the leaders, the organizers will actually wear reflective vests so that everyone knows who they are and they can go up to them and get advice. First aiders all carry the first aid cross and whatnot, so it's not those ones you need to worry about. They're the ones, and most of the time they'll try and keep their own boots in line, but certainly identifying those people and having a relationship of any kind, being able to talk to them, have them talk to you, will be positive. Watch for the numbers of the crowd. A crowd can grow quickly. Leaders and agitators will be waiting for critical mass. That's the number for action to begin to be obtained. But once again, critical mass is not an actual number. That's when they have the mental mindset that they can do what they need to do. Really important, determine if the agitators have community support. Almost every rally they do not. In almost every rally the agitators do not have community support. And that's really a good tool for the police because we can use the protest masses against the agitators. Best to control themselves. We've seen many a fight break out. And there was, I'm just trying to remember what it was. There was a big event in the U.S. and it was a group of metal workers or something like that were on strike. And a group of veterans happened to come by when these metal workers lowered an American flag and started stomping on it. They took care of business. The veterans took care of business. So many times we don't need to be involved as cops to deal with that issue. The crowd will deal with those issues themselves. There's an awful lot of shoe tying and looking away and, you know, oh, not done yet. Color coding. Color coding is something that they do. In fact, they're very open about it. During G8, we had a rally. There was about 16,000 people at this rally. They did their snake march through downtown Calgary, and they stopped at a certain spot at the backside of the Federal Building, and they announced, we are now done our main portion of the protest march. We are going to now split into red and green. All those going red over there, all those green stay here. Well, as you can tell, red is a violent criminal element. And they split. They had about 150 head off to the red side. Now, a lot of them started walking over to the red side and then looked back and saw the many, many thousands not and decided they weren't quite as red as they were a minute ago. But nonetheless, the red rally went on its way, and of course we dealt with them in a different way than we dealt with the green rally. Black and teal, two that aren't, the teal are the terrorists, and that is consistent with the black as well. Black Bloc is a terrorist faction that managed to make enough money to travel internationally to attend rallies to cause problems. The year before G8 came to Calgary, it was in Italy, and one of the protesters was shot and killed by a policeman there. What's that?
That's his last rally.
It was his last rally. He is a martyr now, though. He is the call to arms by many of these rally supporters. He was armed with a fire extinguisher and walked by a police vehicle with his fire extinguisher and got triple tapped. And the determination was that the fire extinguisher presented a risk. So they whacked him. And there it was, done. Had their hearing. Do you believe that was a weapon? Yep. All right.
ACLU over there.
Here's another box of ammo.
You have to waste that third bullet.
Consider that your qualifications.
Talk about, we talked about this a minute ago, cooperative, passive resistant, active resistant, assaultive, and lethal. Okay, we want to only be involved in the first three. And in terms of the third one, there's a bit of a split. With active resistors, the only area that we will be involved with active resistor is holding that until it's taken over. So if we have a group that are tying themselves together or joining themselves with devices, we will just maintain a spot with them. But if we start getting into assaultive or lethal, it's the command Starbucks on 3, and away you go. We're not in a position to deal with that. We are not in a position to take charge of an event that is becoming lethal or assaultive. Here we go. Lethal, assaulting police with Molotov cocktails, flammable liquids. Take it for what it's worth. Identifying precursors. When we identify precursors to violence, we need to sort of understand the bigger picture. And we're not necessarily talking about rallies any longer. We're talking about friendly gatherings. When we start to see some of the precursors,